American reservations, and they still live on reservations. There's things called Indian schools. They've now been basically outlawed, but up until about 15 years ago, we did the same thing you guys have just told us you did, where we would pull the children off the reservation and send them to all-white schools to try to culture them. And there's been this pushback from a lot of tribes to try to bring back their culture. And what's interesting, and this is going to probably throw you guys for a loop, the way we've kind of reconciled it is we've recognized them as sovereign nations and given them the right to own and operate casinos, which is a very interesting way to give payback. So the casinos in the United States are run by the tribes, with some exceptions, but for the most part, that's been our reconciliation, trying to find a source of revenue to pay back the tribes. Nobody wants to give them money. So anyway, I throw that at you. Our reconciliation solution has been here. You guys can go run the gambling in the United States and use the profits as you see fit. I don't want to hog the camera. So this is great. The Aborigine story. In fact, if one of you want to explain to these guys who are the Aborigines, you know, we have a boomerang sitting here. Maybe you can just give us a little history, because I don't think they understand exactly who these people are that you're talking about. Thank you.
Great, you jumping in on this.
Well, let's put it this way. Did you guys have you guys ever heard that? Sorry, have you guys
Just having a bit chat now about it. Yes. Yes.
Hi guys, I'm Janish. So the Aboriginals have been here for roughly 40,000 years. They were, the reason Australia was called Terra Nullius is because when Captain Cook came here, they didn't see it as like a form of settlement, as like in England they didn't have houses or anything. The Aboriginal people were nomads, so they would just walk around. Like here, our school's situated in Parramatta. Parramatta is it's an Aboriginal. What they would do here, they would hunt for eels and make traps out of plants and then catch eels in the river close by. And then after a while, they'd move on to the next bit of land. So there's how many tribes? They were like in tribes, in nations, and like they were situated all over Australia. The boomerang that you have sitting there was used for hunting. Have you guys heard of a didgeridoo?
Yeah. Define it.
The didgeridoo is basically a carved out piece of wood that they would use for music and for corroborees, which was a tradition for them.
You guys ever
They also have various traditions where a boy turning into a man, they would take him to a sacred piece of land where no women were allowed, and they would teach him like how to hunt, and I'm pretty sure some of it.
Secrets, very important stories.
They teach them very important stories and secrets of their people, and they pass down their stories through word. So they didn't do paintings of their stories, like of their history really, and instead they passed it through word. And the same would go for women. They would go to a different place where no man could go, and they would teach their history through word now. Yeah, women's history, and also they're teaching how to gather food and stuff like that.
Bring forward in the other conversation. This is really looking at the concept of where are we sitting in 2016 globally with human rights. I actually was listening to our national radio a couple of days ago. I was telling Mr. Beverly, it's actually a profession in front of me. The comment was globalization has decreased inequalities. Globalization has decreased inequalities across the world. Globalization has seemed to decrease equality within a country. And I can say, just by thinking about what we're doing, we have certainly decreased the aspect of inequality around the world, trying to decrease it, but within our own countries, that's a big question. Have we increased equality in our countries? Has it remained still an issue, or has it decreased?
Good question. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. How 1968, being the 50th anniversary of that photo, which started this whole discussion, so much has changed for the better, but there are still enormous problems. We had both in our country and I think globally. I think you're right. Who wants to take a stab at that? Yeah. Well.
We kind of talked about this before. Like, yeah, it's been a huge change since like 1960s and stuff. Like, in 70s, like, where like black people are allowed to like sit on any part of the bus now, like allowed to drink out of the same water fountains. But like, you look at the big picture, we still have a lot of race problems happening now. We're having a new like Black Lives Matter movement. So you can kind of say it's gotten better in the big picture, but it's kind of a blanket over many more problems.
Who else? Who else wants to go? Right? Ask them.
Yeah, awesome.
I just have a quick question. I'm Chris again. Do you guys know what Black Lives Matter is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just speak to the, and then just in one.
So it doesn't come up as a major issue in Australia. It's sort of known as primarily black organization against racist police brutality directed towards them. That's basically what we know about it.
Yeah, it's pretty spot on.
How about Kaepernick? We talked about that.
I think a few of our Aboriginal rights movements have kind of pushed on to they kind of use Black Lives Matter, like they kind of joined with them in a sense. Because in Australia there's also quite a bit of racist police brutality against Aboriginals, like quite a lot of them die in custody. Or I don't remember the exact figure, but the vast majority of people in jail are Aboriginal, despite them being a small minority of the population.
And very important for your comment. If you look at the number of people in jails, it's the Aboriginal Australian people that tend to have the highest incidence of death in incarceration, which is
Very similar.
Yeah, so alongside being most men in jail, most men also die in jail due to incidents.
Very similar.
random. Question because. So we're showing quite a lot of decrease in our equality. Okay.
Essentially, the main question we have as part of this forum is, are the Olympics an appropriate forum to make a political statement and debate human rights issues?
Are the Olympics an appropriate forum?
It's a good forum.
It's a good
Like
forum
a
to have.
platform.
So this is like,
I mean, you got Kaepernick.
Kaepernick, I mean, I think we-
Kaepernick right now.
Yeah.
Who would like to come up? Who hasn't come up yet?
There you go. Go in there, guy.
Hi, I'm Kyle, and I don't know if my opinion on this is the same as some of my classmates behind me, but one of the things I think is that it is appropriate because you have this global stage where the Olympics are really about like the world coming together and watching all these athletes like in a sense compete against each other, but it's also like coming together in one one location to kind of host like the World Olympics. And so for these people from essentially all around the world, and especially the U.S. and Australia, like equally on different parts of the world, to kind of do this thing together and make a stand like this together. I think it is an appropriate stage because we couldn't really get the world talking the way these people did back then in a stage that wasn't built up like the Olympics.
Anybody else?
For next. Do we have an opinion? Do you think the Olympics is a pretty showcase for this?
Yeah, just on that, what about, you said political standards of the Olympics, like, are okay, but what if someone made a political statement for, say, like, Korea, against South Korea, and against whatever they think they might have done wrong?
All right, Kyle, defend your
I mean,
pretty slow.
I think he's just saying,
Is the question like if someone did that?
no, he's
I
saying.
don't know if it was
what
if it was like a North Korean protester against South Korea. So this is not what's considered like a maybe a good, like what we would think is like, oh, this is the right story, right stage. But what if it's not? If it's like if it's not the right, if it's like North Korea protesting South Korea is this question.
Well, and where is the protest? North Korea? It's not
Yeah, so
gonna happen.
I've got an example. Like at the last Olympics, at the Egyptian wrestler didn't refuse to go against an Israeli wrestler.
Yeah.
And got sent home.
Right.
So that
No,
is-
So the Egyptians are protesting what's happening in Israel. Like, is that okay for that Egyptian guy to do it?
No? Who wants to jump on
You're on.
So, well, yeah. So I guess you could kind of say, like, if you have to differentiate, like, all the different things, and you say that some are right, some are wrong, you could go the complete opposite way and say that the Olympics are for the athletes to compete and the countries to compete and keep the problems that are happening out of it and just focus on, like, coming together, competing, and not causing problems that are out of their hands.
But you guys mentioned in Australia about the 36 Olympics. You guys aware of what happened in the 36 Olympics? Okay. The 36 Olympics were held in Berlin, and Hitler used them to showcase the Aryan race. It was as political as you possibly can imagine. You know, I'm not sure, Kyle. You're entitled to your opinion, but once you let, well, you guys, hi. You raised a wonderful point earlier about the 36 Olympics because that was nothing but a propaganda machine. And well, where do you draw the line? The 68 protests. I can understand why they took the medals away from those guys because that's not what the Olympics were designed for. But your point, Kyle, is that we did have the world stage. I don't think it's. My opinion is you have to be very, very careful using the Olympics as a protest.
Sorry, we missed a lot of that. It might be because you're moving. Sorry, if you could just repeat some of those ideas. They're really important here. Sorry.
Okay, my point was. You made the point at the very beginning of this video that the 36 Olympics were a protest. It was a propaganda. The whole thing was a propaganda thing set up by Albert Speer and Hitler. And that's the extreme. And it almost killed the Olympics forever. So we go back the other way, and there have been other protests that have happened in the Olympics. But the 68 protests, I can understand why the Olympic Committee took the medals away. Because once you open that door that you're going to let athletes use it as a forum, Where do you stop? And the Egyptian wrestler is a great example. Personally, I'm glad they sent him home. But if it had been the Israeli who didn't shake his hand, they should send him home too. Ideally, though, once you send a couple people home, people will start to shake hands. And then that's good. So, Kyle, I get a little nervous when you defend the right to protest in the Olympics, because it really is a special event to bring everybody together. So personally, in my opinion, is you should have no political statements in the Olympics. And as soon as you see one, I'm fine with the organizers shutting it down, sending somebody home.
All right. Who wants to follow Mr. Mead?
Oh, you got to turn it back up.
Actually ties in with our study on sport and history. We focus very much on looking at events and understanding the power of sport. The fact that it's a great opportunity globally for countries to obviously compete on a global stage, on many occasions to unite, acts of friendship, acts of reconciliation. But at the same time, there is a dark side to international sport. The fact that because it is a very powerful mechanism of globalisation, it can be used as an opportunity to make very strong political messages. We've deliberately looked at the number of Olympic Games for that very reason. 36 is a classic example because, as you said, the Nazis used the Olympic Games as a mechanism for propaganda. Sadly, it was done very, very effectively. There were a number of countries that were considering boycotting the Games because of the stories that they'd heard. The Nuremberg laws had only been passed shortly before that. There was actually consideration to have an alternative Olympic Games, to boycott Germany. But what Germany did very well under the Nazis was that they were able to basically hide the anti-Semitism, certainly the anti-Semitism rhetoric, and try to put on a very strong show and present Nazism as strong government. At a time in international affairs when there was a lot of conjecture and debate about democracy and how economies were going as a result of the Great Depression. And sadly, there were some people within allied nations, in particular Britain, and I think to some extent America, that saw strength in fascist regimes. What we found very interesting in our study of 68 was that I think one of the key players of the IOC, who was the American delegate, actually had no problems with Nazi salutes in 1936, but was incredibly vocal against the actions of the 60s. And it's a classic point, I think, for debate about where do you draw the line on political statements, which then brings us to probably the point that they are incredibly dangerous, even if there is value or benefit to those. But 68 certainly did address issues of human rights, both in America and in Australia. I think as a positive from our perspective, we're now recognising the role of Peter Norman, the significance of that particular context, and I think we're able to put it into perspective in regards to the political issues that we're still facing today in regards to reconciliation, native title, land rights, basic human rights.
You want to ask him?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't want to take over your thing,
No.
but that's
We
fascinating.
just have a question for Mr. Mead about, did Australia boycott 1980? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, did they boycott the Moscow Games with the
Moscow
United
Games?
States?
We did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
80 and 84 were obviously the two Olympics that, you had boycotts.
you guys aware of that? That we boycotted the 80 Olympics because of the Afghanistan invasion by the Russians?
Yeah.
Okay. But we put a lot of pressure on people like Australia to follow us. You know, there was
And then the response was 84.
Right.
What?
It was Los Angeles.
Well, that's when the Russians boycotted us. I guess. You
Okay.
guys
Who
must
wants
have
to go? I
questions.
know. Who wants to go?
Yeah.
Want me to go first?
Colin. Yeah. Talk about Colin.
All right.
Well, he's okay.
Have we moved forward with our human rights? Have we just become better at masking our racist deals?
Great question. He asked,
Masking out right
have
percent.
we,
Have we like gotten better, or are we just masking it?
have we gotten better, or are we just masking our racist ideals? Good question. You can correlate to what we were talking about in the NFL.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. You want to start that?
There's a question.
Are we masking? Yeah,
Hold hands,
question.
hold hands. Talk about
Ask him if they're-
Colin.
Hey guys, so at least over here, I mean, I think we're definitely masking the ideas of racism. I mean, we're definitely making progress. And one example that we have is Colin Kaepernick in the NFL. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but Brandon's kind of going to talk about him and what he's been doing lately. So.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Brandon. So Colin Kaepernick is a franchise football player, plays quarterback in the NFL, and he's really put on a pedestal, and he's been felt by what's been going on right now with the Black Lives Matter movement. And on the day of 9/11, he had a game, and he came out and decided to take a knee while the national anthem was being played, and that sparked a lot of talk between fellow teammates and other teams and just the world in general. And pretty much it was just, he took a knee because he was on a stage as, like again, he's an NFL quarterback. People look up to him. I play quarterback myself, and I look up to him. And pretty much he just wanted a message to be sent out for everybody to hear. And he felt like taking a knee on the day of 9/11 to him was appropriate because everybody was watching, and knowing that who he is and what his name and who he represents plays a big role, and he pretty much just wants to bring awareness to what's happening around the world right now with Black Lives Matter and a lot of African Americans being abused, and their rights are not being battered right now. So right now, that is spreading around other schools, it's spreading around teammates. I know a lot of teammates have been hit knees during the national anthem, high school teams, some college players. So it's definitely bringing awareness within the sports aspect, and also through veterans and so on. So like you see in the picture, a lot of the players, a lot of the guys are putting their hands up, and during the national anthem, a lot of the players are doing the same thing. So yeah, so pretty much that's representing what we're talking about right now, and it has a big role in what's happened then to what's still going on today. So I don't know if you guys are aware of what happened or if you heard, but guys, I mean, you guys can talk about it, or if you guys live here, we would like to do that.
Hey, I'm Rupert. I'm not sure if you guys know what the AFL and NRL are. They stand for Australian Football League and National Rugby League. Anyway, an Aboriginal, ex-Aboriginal player proposed to do thinking that at the AFL Grand Finals that they take an knee during the national anthem. And then anyway, President AFL and NRL players came out and said the national anthem is part of our history, and that we should not do that because they want to take a step forward in the right direction. I don't know.
can't understand what he's saying.
A rugby player.
A rugby player got up.
When did this happen? Was this very recently?
Yeah, the NRL grand final was 2 weeks ago. The AFL
Probably
grand
inspired
final
by
was also 2 weeks ago.
Oh, so he did the same thing?
but after Kaepernick, so like they probably were inspired by it.
Oh, so they did. Okay, okay.
Yeah. In school, quite often that race issue, they probably wasn't the first time.
This question was
I have a question for him. Like, I don't know if he-
Aren't you gonna answer the comment?
yeah, but I wanted to ask him, what do they think is a good stage, like, to advertise that type of? I don't know. Is that a good question?
Sorry, I was just wondering whether you think the national anthem should bring people together rather than be a form of protest, as it can be something that everyone from the country stands under.
Clarify that, had they heard of that before?
Heard of what?
The NFL? Yeah. So you guys wanna come in and join the conversation? What up?
I mean,
Well,
All right, Larry.
I think that the fact that if someone is protesting the national anthem, that evokes like problems that must exist within the country, and it shows that the country itself is not taking appropriate measures to unite the people. And because if the national anthem is something that makes people angry, it makes people feel unwanted, that is just something that shows that the country has a lot of problems to address. So that's clearly happening in America. And like you said, in Australia, there is obviously a lack of unity between Aboriginals and the rest of the Australian population. So it seems like we have common ground that we need to work on as far as uniting our people.
they never came out for national anthem. Like some of the teams, like some of the guys who stay inside the locker room. I don't know the actual source of it.
What, anybody else?
Oh, let me ask you a question.
Have something that, yeah.
Brandon, again, I just have a quick question. I just, I want to wonder, knowing that Colin Kaepernick took a knee on 9/11, during his game, do you think that was an appropriate time to do that? And was that stage appropriate for him to bring on that, awareness and the movement that he's trying to bring on right now?
Well, as far as Colin Kaepernick, against the Titanic, it's not like actually only 4% of actual homicides towards blacks is committed by police, and something like just over 90% of this done by other blacks. This is probably from gang violence in Chicago, but this would probably delegitimize the issue here for which group actually is though, and I believe Colin Kaepernick was actually brought up by a white family, so as far as his own personal experiences with this, it's his opinion to make the point, but it is a bit contentious.
So, like, if you don't think that's the right stage to, if that's the right stage to like voice his opinion, like, because a lot of people thought it was more than just a statement about how they're not treated well, because like on 9/11 it wasn't more than just like police, it was all firefighters who got offended by that. So do you think it's a better stage than a football game to voice his, like a sports event the voices like disapproval about that.
We're just saying, isn't sports supposed to be like an arena to unite people? Yeah, like friendly.
Can you say that one more time?
Yes, if sports is to unite people, then we want these protests.
Yeah. Also, you could add that then 1995 rugby World Cup when Nelson Mandela used sport to unite the apartheid movement. Well, get rid of it.
So, I mean, like, it's happened over like the long-term effects of it. When it first happens, everyone.
We were saying that, like, the fact that Kaepernick was, like, raised by a white man, illegitimate, like, what's the word, illegitimate? His yeah.
Yeah, just on the 9/11 thing, I suppose, but it might not be right just because I'm assuming there were also like firefighters and like people who also died during 9/11. So that might not be the best place to do it, but we also could have considered when's the best like time to get the nation's attention. Because I'm assuming that, it's 9/11, I'm assuming that a few people watching that game.
The audience.
Oh, and also in sport, we also got a few cases of racism in Australia. So there's some people start calling Adam Goods, who's a famous AFL player, who got an 8. And there are a few cases where they would throw. I remember generally around they throw bananas at black players.
That's pretty.
Yeah, that's bad. If that happened like here,
Yeah,
there would be a huge
Right.
uprising.
Yeah, it does say that.
Like,
Yeah.
like
It's happened in soccer.
if that kind of talk against players, like on players' age, if that happened in like an NFL or NBA platform, like there'd be a major uprising. It's like that's quite severe. Like I haven't really heard much of that happening in our sports arenas. I mean, I'm sure it has, but that's alarming, and we all kind of reacted like, wow.
Well,
Yeah,
we
that would
just
not
did
happen.
have a situation in Chicago with the kids, the Latino kids at the basketball game, saying "Build the wall." The crowd started chanting "Build the wall." You know what I'm talking about?
Like at a high school game.
There was a high school game in basketball just recently, I believe it was in Chicago, and the one team was mostly white, and one school was Latino. And because of the presidential race we have going on with Donald Trump saying he wants to build a wall with Mexico, the kids started chanting, "Build a wall, build a wall, build a wall." And they stopped the game. It got really ugly. There's an example where, I would argue that's just as bad as throwing a banana at somebody on a field. And that wasn't using the athletes, that was spectator to spectator.
But yeah, just we don't like condone calling it hate. Yeah, so like if you threw the banana at a player, an average player in an AFL match, I think you got she might have had a fine as well, but yeah.
Yeah, good. Thanks for clarifying.
Are we almost done?
Yeah.
Alright,
You guys, so you guys, study hall is gonna kind of start soon here. when we best wrap this up? We really, yeah, okay, I was gonna ask a question, because he has to go off the closing meeting.
I have one quick question. One of the reasons that this move, like the Black Lives Matter movement and Colin Kaepernick has become so big in America is because the media in this country really escalates a lot of the problems that we have because they're quick to make headlines and quick to make assumptions about everything that's going on. And so I was just wondering if in Australia, like when people take a knee during the national anthem, like is it a very big national event in Australia because, like I said, in America, doing something like that, it gets across the country really fast, and everyone is talking about it like the next day or even right after the game. So I was wondering if the media has a big impact on social issues in Australia.
So yeah, media in Australia is well, they're pretty kind of savage. We've had six successive governments in the last few years. They really like they generally hate quite a few prime ministers who come up. An example, like say Kevin Rudd, who they did kind of they went on for a bit. I mean, he wasn't the best prime minister, but yeah. Would you say the media in your country has like an effect like that? But do they essentially turn the public entirely against the government?
But the media's so fractured though that you're not going to get the whole people against the government.
So I don't think the media really has the power to turn an entire country against the government, but it definitely will change the opinion of a lot of people because if they see a really like nasty headline of someone that they had someone that they looked up to, like such as Colin Kaepernick, you see like Colin Kaepernick sits down during the national anthem, and automatically you think, oh, like, that's such a bad move, and that's something we really shouldn't be looking up to anymore because he sat down and sang the national anthem. That's something we just don't do, and so they don't really have the power to change the minds of the entire nation, but they do hold the power to change the opinions of people in the country.
Politicians and coaches politicians and coaches of major teams are often ruthlessly criticized for this. The media does tend to try and defend its sort of control over what people think to a degree. And that actually rewarded people up for reading the WikiLeaks of the emails recently. It's basically just trust what we say.
I'm Mr. Fury. I have one sort of final question to bring it back to Peter Norman. And I noticed when I did my research that it took your government over 6 years after Peter Norman passed away to issue a sort of apology about they were wrong in how they treated him when he returned from the Olympics and how he should have been allowed to race in, I believe it was the 72 would have been the next Olympics. Why do you think it took them 6 years after he died and almost 50 years later to apologize?
or it was recusal. And it was seems to be, I reckon, we Oxford, but only now we can accept that.
Do you agree there's a level of laziness to actually sort of see from other people's perspective at that point in time in Australia? Because we still have the White Australia policy where we limited immigration. This happened in 2012, likely because his nephew Martin Norman actually created a documentary about him, and this came with a sense of embarrassment on behalf of Australia. Establishment as it was seen as a direct insult to the government, and it was demonized by the media.
That was a good question, Holly. Well done. Good point.
Our feed just died, so we can't see you. We can see you on our small screen. We have to on our large screen. So it's 6:53. Do we each want to take some closing remarks?
Perhaps, yeah, maybe final thoughts.
Yeah.
What we've discussed, an opportunity to wrap it up.
Sounds good. What have you learned?
Do you think by doing these things like kneeling down during the national anthem is helping bring these past things to light, or is it just stopping us from moving forward with our social justice?
Yeah.
Gets us to the dialogue.
I mean, I think it's clearly working in the way they want it to, because we're having this FaceTime right now talking about these problems. And if it didn't work, everyone would just be like, no, we wouldn't mention this, but it's bringing to light the problem.
We all just wanted to thank you for talking about like the Aborigines and the different ways of life that they had, and like just teaching us about that. We didn't really know much about the SARD letter and note, and just wanted to thank you guys for that.
Anybody else? Well, hi, Linda.
Mrs. Fosley gets the bus ready, and she gets through the tunnel to Australia. We'll be here.
No, we've enjoyed it very much, Linda. Thanks so much. I think it was a great first run. We would love to entertain you.
Ask them if they know they have the reputation of being the friendliest people in the world.
We've learned so much, whether it be the contact from racial dividers, the whites, the natives, and the African Americans, as well as the whether it is appropriate to make political statements during sporting events. So thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Linda.
Bye, Linda. Thanks.
Bye. You guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Should we stop?
Yes, we'll stop.
That was cool.
That was cool, right?
Yeah.
Very, wow.
Yeah,
We should have just hung up after that.
Yeah, we should. I thought they were gonna just like lose connection real quick.
Like we did. We tried. Yeah.
Yeah, we
No,
tried.
that was great. What did you guys?
Oh, that's cool, though.
What was the best part?
They had some good questions.
They had some great
Yeah.
questions. They did. Well, they were.
They're really
class, again.
articulate. Like they
Yes.
speak very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all came up
They
with
have,
like
like,
their hands
good
behind their back. They
vocabulary.
were like,
they're in 10th grade. But they have had, now, remember, this is almost the end of the year, they've had a year's worth of this class sport in,
Yeah, right.
right?
Things like they're where we are.
I know. And we kind of piece things together, right?
I know.
Like kind of frantically piece things together at the end of the hour. So it was fine. I think we all enjoyed it. I think they enjoyed it. I think.
I think you'd be more prepared next time now that you know how fun it is to be
Would you
prepared.
be willing to do it again?
Yeah. With them or like
With them?
another topic? Or,
Yeah, another topic or another country, and this is just a friend that I had from the IBSC. That's the school.
I thought it was amazing though that you guys didn't know the story behind the Aborigines. Isn't it amazing how parallel it is?
Yeah,
to
such
Native
similar
American? It's
problems,
the same
but
problem, except we have a different layer. We had the slave trade, they didn't.
When they just had the rugby game,
But, yeah, but I thought that was fascinating.
That was fascinating
Yeah.
too. I mean, it's
like 2
global.
weeks ago, and it's like 2 weeks ago.
Do you think that relates to the fact that it's already happening here?
I think it has to. I think it has to.
I think it has to. Yeah.
But that's about the average. Like,
Right.
it's not
Yeah,
about-
but it's the same. It's the
But-
same type
But
of
that's
movement.
their issue. Their Black Lives Matter issue for them
Is
is the
Aborigines.
Aborigines.
Right, and right. I think that's what the guy's trying to raise. Same thing. Use the stage. And that's countries can kind of cross pollinate and get inspiration.
The other thing about it too is like they talked about they have violence against like the Aborigines and police like brutality.
And
they
remember
have, like,
Aborigines in jail?
Yeah,
Same
like
thing,
most
yeah.
people that are found in jail here are
What did he know his stats?
Yeah,
That
he
guy.
did
We
know.
made them up.
I also like the comment about how the guy asked, aren't sports supposed to bring us together instead of try and create separation?
We didn't really answer that question.
No, we
We
did not.
didn't.
Well, we
And
said-
especially though the
Earlier.
Olympics,
Earlier.
especially the Olympics.
Well, we said earlier. I said earlier the Olympics could be just for athletic.
But it's different standpoint.
But
Which is fine. That's fine.
It's good. It brings
The
up
only way to
different
get the
points.
whole world
But
talking.
it's hard because why did they stand up there and do that? Because they had no other voice.
Right.
They were being paid nothing. These people were barely they were being
They were
they had
working
no
on farms.
support from the internet. Like today,
They were going to
like there,
boycott.
you go to Colorado and there's all these resources, but these guys had nothing, and they were getting
You get, like,
basically
sponsored
they were
now.
getting
My
basically abused for their athletic talent. And
My-
they had no great.
My
They had no
favorite
voice.
quote from the documentary was I can't remember which guy said it, but had the African Americans boycotted that Olympics, 3 completely unworthy athletes would have won gold medals.
Remember he said that
Oh,
he
Greg
was
Norman.
like,
Greg Norman.
He was like,
Yeah.
everyone was like, I
Yeah,
would have got
yeah,
gold
yeah.
medals. They weren't there.
Right. Right. He was like, darn
Well,
it,
but like
you know, they
in
win.
women's racing too, they were saying like they before leading up to the race, they were talking about how black athletes were sweeping the events, right? And all of a sudden, if they had boycotted it, all these other people would have won.
Yeah. They-
And they also said that if they boycotted, then maybe no one would know anything about this.
Yeah. That'd just be another race.
Because they used the right.
And we asked earlier in the morning, or whenever I saw you guys, how many of you had seen that image before we started talking about it, right? And there were a couple.
I saw it, but I didn't know what it was.
You didn't know what it was.
Yeah, just like
I just saw like the picture.
Right.
Google's got it hanging on his like wall
Right.
in his classroom. Like I always like look at it. It's like, oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Civil rights.
You know what came up in the O.J. Simpson trial?
Did it?
That's it.
Yeah.
Because when O.J. used the defense that he was for black persecuted athletes.
Oh. Now I learned something. I didn't know Kaepernick was raised by white parents.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah, like adopted by
Adopted? Yeah.
Chicago? No.
I didn't know that. I think we all learned something, right? Did you learn something?
Yeah, they're like a wealthy
I'm
family.
trying to think. There was one thing that one kid said that I was like, I've never heard that perspective before, and it was so good. But now I just
And now you forget it.
Well, yeah, the whole thing like what they.
The monkey thing was
Yeah.
interesting because
That was a soccer thing.
right, because that's a soccer thing. Like you're in European,
They
like
do
African
that.
players in Europe that when there are statements again, they call monkey.
It's not like
It's happened.
uncommon though. It's like it.
But they
happens
made a
online.
big effort to stamp it out, but it's been a big been like a thing.
But it never happens here. I thought
But,
it was
right,
kind of crazy.
but here, right, because here, like I think it would be a huge
a little more sensitive.
thought it was kind of crazy how they talked about like how like they kind of talked about how like unimportant like what Colin Kaepernick was like doing and like I guess like not really how unimportant that was, but like the crimes, I guess. They were talking about like in Chicago, they said like what?
Oh, right.
Some
The
percentage or whatever.
the Black Lives Matter is talking about police brutality and the
so
number
it's like,
the number of
police
deaths.
brutality is like
It's not even.
it's like it's like it doesn't even really matter that much.
It's
We're
like
all,
gang on gang violence. It's like 90% of it.
yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of what you see. But like they kind of media like blows it out of proportion.
That's interesting,
they
because
did
he
talk
even
about
said
their
if that
media
statistic
forming
is
their-
true.
They said their media was more.
Yeah.
They said their
The other thing
media was like more. Like
And then it's just like
developed,
the
more
media,
developed or
develop,
whatever.
yeah, and then it's
But
and then
I think-
he said like the media defends like their position and try to say like our media never does that. Like our media just says like the news. Like they don't say like, oh, yesterday we covered this story and it's like this is what was said and we kind of.
But
You
I
don't
also
get that.
I think I also
Perspectives.
think maybe I don't know enough about the Australian media, but like here our media is so divided over opinions that I think their media can if they get after somebody, they can bring down a government. The media can bring down a government. Whereas
I don't think
here,
ours-
like that doesn't happen.
That's obviously not true because they literally showed like all those like videos of like Donald Trump. Like if that like doesn't make you like
No,
not
but
watch
but
it, I'm
but
saying,
it's so divided that
Yeah.
like if you're like a kind of a liberal viewer, you're going to be going on MSNBC and you're never going to see this other stuff. And you're a conservative, you're going to be going on Fox and you're never going to see the other stuff. And it's so divided that they don't in the U.S. they don't. There's a lot of power in the media, but they don't unify.
Yeah,
It's
you
not
can
like
pick what you
unified,
wanna see.
where it sounds like their media is more unified.
Do you think that they can like reach changes easier because they do have like 300 million less people than we do? Like it's easier to kind of consolidate them because there's less people to consolidate.
And it's very homogeneous.
Right.
It is.
Yeah, unless you're from Perth, they're all the same. It's mind-boggling. Perth is 3,000 miles by itself.
Was that in Brisbane? They said.
This is in
No, this
Sydney.
was Sydney.
Yeah, that right. There's a lot of homogeneity in the country. Incredible.
Well, what do they say? Aborigines are 4%.
Right.
There's no African American population. So 96
Right. I
versus
mean,
40.
I think there's been some recent, like within the last century, more immigration from some other areas. I think they have some Asian immigration, but
Yeah, but they're the ones who do the Nehru, the island. What, Narita?
Narita, yeah.
People who tried to come in by boat,
Yeah.
that swept off to an island.
Okay.
It's rough. You can't immigrate to Australia. Big time.
My
That was
sister
fun.
abroad to Australia. She had to get 2 visas. She had to go. She only could get a 90-day one.
Yeah.
She had to come back and then went back to get it and got another 90-day.
They're very clear. They don't want you staying.
No.
But it's interesting. It's in the Australian like mindset is that kind of connected to the walkabout idea, which is this an Aboriginal idea of like you just kind of go off for a while, but in the white population, it's kind of in their psyche. So a lot of Australians, while they don't want people to go to Australia, Australians go off in large numbers in their like kind of early 20s for a while. They go because it's easy to go to England because it's part of the Commonwealth, and they go traveling. I mean, my camp that my family runs, we have a few Australian counselors every year. We had this one guy who came for 10 years because he hated the winter, and so we would have summer there. He worked in like a resort town there as a chef, and then he would come to us for the summer here, and then he did that for 10 years.
And Australia promotes it with their public policies. If you're an employer in Australia, you have to give the 2-month summer holiday. You're expected to go.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting culture.
And it's part like and they know like they know it's not forever. They know they're just doing it for like a couple of years and then they're going back and they're settling down. Yeah, it's like what?
I met a lot of people who left for a year.
Yep.
They really weren't gonna.
And they have to hold your job.
Do they?
Yeah, in Australia, they hold your job. It's what they do.
So you guys enjoyed it?
Mhm.
Huh?
Yeah.
They don't want you.
And I think, if, you know, I would like to do it again.
Well, and there's a lot of other things we could do because the 2000 we could get into like the 2000 Sydney Olympics where the Aboriginal sprint runner won the gold medal, and that was like a huge deal. But that at that same Olympics, Norman wasn't invited.
He wasn't allowed to.
Wasn't allowed to go. Yeah, and I don't know what their schedule
wasn't
is.
like-
Is there gonna be heading into-
No, he wasn't like not allowed. He
Strong
wasn't like invited to the.
He
They have a
wa- he
ceremony
wasn't
for
invi-
the other people.
Right. And that's similar. Right. And it's the type of event where you expect someone who is done so well.
Especially
He's
like
probably the
before.
best sprinter the country's ever
But
produced.
he still holds the world record.
The Australian record, right? And he should be like someone who's invited to the Olympics and like, oh, look here's Peter
Yeah,
Norman, and
should've been.
Do we have a person that's at all like that?
Like a Peter Norman?
Yeah. No, just like somewhat like Peter Norman, but someone who
96
won.
Olympics. Who lit the torch? 96 Olympics. No matter.
Ali.
Ali, right?
He was.
Yeah, that's true.
But
He was-
the other two from that photo, right, are not like in the they're not heroes. You don't. I mean, you guys have never heard of these guys before.
Yeah.
They're almost like a race.
In Australia, if you said Peter Norman, people know who it is. Is he a hero?
But
There's a thing that she sent that had, you know, Peter Norman Day. You know, let's celebrate Peter Norman Day and give him his glory. But I asked her if that was like an annual thing, and she's like, no, it's not.
Didn't they say like at the beginning too, like before their unit, they didn't really know anything about it?
Mhm.
I think they mentioned.
Yeah. And again, they studied it, you know, in a classroom.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah. Pretty fascinating. So, it did, and it was neat the way we kind of went off into some other tangents. I mean, there's so much that it encompassed. But it was a good image. Use. But what,
I go back to the connection of like the AFL guy Ben putting
Yeah.
like I love those kind of connections.
Mhm.
That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to clarify that when I was in. But I don't know if it sounded, they heard of Kaepernick.
Yeah,
They
that's
said he has white parents and.
We might have looked into that a little bit too.
Well, they might
Yeah.
They might have looked into his
Yeah.
class. But also how much there's Australian football, which is very different from our football. How much they know. But there have been Australian players who have come and played.
I'm sure they watched some football there, right? Some NFL football.
When I was in Australia during January, they were definitely plugged into the playoffs.
Were they?
Yeah, it was big. You have to get up at 3 in the morning to watch it, but they were doing that.
Yeah. I watched the Giants Pats one of the Giants Pats Super Bowls from London. It was fascinating, like because it had the official Fox the Fox feed, but then when Fox went to break here, they went to their studio and the collection of people that they had found to do the studio was fascinating. They had like the main guy, but then they had a guy who was like, I think he was like a kicker somewhere in somewhere like, and a guy who was a coach is like a Division III coach or something. Like literally, I think they found guys on the street like, "What, you know American football? Like
You
you're on
explain
TV."
this rule?
Yeah. And then when the Giants won, they literally hadn't thought about it at all. And they couldn't flash to the studio and then nothing to say.
That was really neat. Right. That was fun.
That was a drive-by, wasn't it? He was just hanging out in the hall and you happened to see him?
He was, yeah.
Right place at the right time.
Didn't read any emails, didn't know.